Are you constantly in a state of irritability, lacking energy and motivation, which might be quite um, not abnormal in today's season of a seasonal depression, which may be a very relevant topic for you today. But we're going to jump in on tonight's topic. We're wrapping up the season finale of holistic communication, with tonight focusing in on emotional wellness and its connection to your communication style. We'll be back right after the intro. I'm Linnita, hosting your podcast host. I'm also the founder of Vocal Value, where we equip emerging leaders with the mindset and skill set to become better communicators with themselves, at work, and at home. And you are watching the season finale of, we're calling it Holistic Communication. And I am bringing this series to the forefront because I am a certified holistic coach. And I think it's a very unique component to add on to how it affects our communication style, how our well-being affects our communication style. Now, I've never heard anyone talk about public speaking, presentation skills, and communicating through conflict and its relationship to our holistic well-being. I've never heard anyone talk about that. If you have, drop it in the comments. Share that person with me. I'd love to nerd out on their content. I have not heard anyone talk about this, but because I understand human psychology and the state of emotions and how it shows up in other areas of life, I thought it'd be a great topic to talk through to drive awareness about why your well-being matters, especially if you're a leader, especially if you are in a high visibility role where you're required to communicate. I would say especially if you are aiming to be deemed as a authoritative thought leader. Maybe scratch out authoritative, but definitely a thought leader in your space of influence. So the state of your well-being absolutely matters, and I'm hoping that this series did communicate that to those who tuned in. I'm tongue tied today. Let me drink some water. So we talked about, this is emotional wellness is the last of the series, but for the month of October, please go back and watch the other episodes. We talked about physical well-being, mental well-being, well, we didn't talk about spiritual and social well-being. How did we run out of how did we run out of topics today, this season? Hold on. Let me check one more thing while I have you. I've never done this live before. That's interesting. We didn't get a chance to talk about social and spiritual well-being. I'll add it in today. So, let me back up for a second. This weekend, I did a closing keynote at an event at my home church. The event was a college and career. I wouldn't call it just a fair because there were multiple breakout sessions in addition to vendors. But there was an opening session and a closing session. While I don't publicly offer those services anymore, that's an area that I used to serve. My books are for that audience as well. I have to write a new book, and that is on the agenda for 2025. But sometimes I am still like called in or asked to speak in these environments, and so I usually don't turn them down. But they asked me to speak on how parents are supporting their children and their well-being while they're working through college admissions and transitioning into their career paths. Now, I've actually never heard that topic being taught at a college and career expo, but I thought it was a great topic. I am not a mental health practitioner. I am not a licensed practitioner. I'm a certified holistic coach. But I think that the value that our brought to that space on Saturday was powerful. And one of the things that I wanted to generate awareness about to parents was um, the value of getting rest and how being fatigued affects their communication style. So I asked parents after I set up um, the impact of rest and the value of rest. I asked them, um, is anyone comfortable sharing how does what I've shared so far affect the relationship between you and your child? And a few parents raised their hand and we ran a mic to them. And they said things like, I'm so irritable. Like anything will set me off. I'm short tempered. One parent raised their hand and said, I'm not present. It's hard for me to be present. I'm thinking through my own like challenges that I've navigated before I got home, and then there are compounded challenges that I have to address when I get home. I don't feel like doing it. And one parent said, I'm really struggling with transitioning my kids during this time. I'm just having a hard time. And a lot of, I would say, what was shared verbally had a connection and a theme, which is their well-being. Their well-being being the common theme that they shared, the state of their emotions, what might have triggered their emotions. And I think that emotional well-being is, I would say it's the second most priority out of the holistic 5 that I think is critical. Now, when our emotional, let's rephrase that. Signs that our emotional well-being is kind of a little off, definitely that ease of irritability. Like anything gets you upset, inflamed. You find it easy to you're hitting conflict commonly without any like very little effort, just like a ticking time bomb essentially. Some of your personal relationships might be suffering. Maybe there's a staleness or a lack of connection. That could be with your spouse. It can be with a child that you once had connection with. It could also just be with yourself, having that disconnect with self. Another sign that your emotional well-being is off when you have no enjoyment doing the things that you once enjoyed. So doing them, it's really hard for it to fill your cup as it once did. And I want to start by saying that, having an impact emotionally means that you're human. It's not abnormal, and there's nothing wrong with you for feeling that way. Now, my next question as a coach would be, what are we doing to transition our maybe lack of emotional health to supporting it? What are you doing to support that? And I don't have a lot of content that I want to share today because I want to focus on one thing. And I feel when you feel like your emotional well-being is off, I think the cheat code is literally focusing in on your own growth. What do you need? It's really easy in this state to point fingers around how other people are showing up, how they're causing us to feel this kind of way. If this were not here, I would feel. If I didn't have this stressor, it would feel. But know that when you are in a state of emotional blah or wreck, everything, your senses about things, let me rephrase that. You have a heightened sensitivity to irritability. It's like magnified when your emotional state is not in the best place. Everything is magnified. And it's really hard to actually focus in on the things that are going well. I think when we put the focus on our own selves, it shifts gears from pointing fingers and at someone else and pointing them back at ourselves. Now, you could come to this entire series, and I've shared a lot of information actually. A lot of which some people say, you share so much on your podcast. What do people pay you for? And that could be very well true. I'm sharing it because there are some people who they just need to see what the next steps could be. I don't have to be necessarily the person that they choose to work with, but this is a demonstration of how I could serve you. But when you start to focus in on your development, your heightened awareness about others, the finger pointing that we're doing externally goes away. So what is it that you need? Starting to ask ourselves, what could I use during this time? What would elevate my emotional health? What would that look like? What do I need to get to a better place? If you are a high achiever or an organizational leader with a lot of demands, meetings, personnel, that might be rest. It might be some time off so that you can actually process how you feel. So a great time to take off, disconnect, even from things that stimulate you, like social media and movies. Disconnect to completely get into a state of neutral emotionally. Journal, pray. You can even fast if you are a person of faith and practice those principles. So great time to really seek guidance. The Bible says that if you search me with all your heart, you'll find me. And he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So being intentional about what kind of support you need emotionally to get to your state of well-being. This part of focusing on you could look like learning a new skill. I used to say this all the time when I first started teaching public speaking, which is, if you want to grow your confidence, learn something new from scratch and then have the audacity to get good at it. Your confidence will absolutely increase. When I used to coach students and work with parents, I would say, you want to know how to help your child grow their self-esteem? Put them in something that they have to learn that they enjoy. And as they get better over time, their confidence will skyrocket. So it's that same confidence that you see from an athlete when they walk in the room. They have this thing about them, especially when they're in their athletic environment. Like, yeah, this is my stuff. This is my jam. When you do something well, I don't have the science around this, but it does change how you show up when you have a thing that you do well. So what skill would you love to grow in and nurture? This is a great opportunity to focus on what that is. If you are someone who doesn't have a lot of time, I work with a lot of people who, some of my current clients, they don't have a lot of time. I always encourage them to turn their commute into their mobile library. So what what book would you love to read, but you don't have the time? Consider the audio version. Who is it that you love to study a little bit more about and know a little bit more about? Consider downloading a podcast or a book related to that. So we could make excuses and sit in our lack of time, our lack of energy. We could. And we can look for opportunities to begin to point the finger back at ourselves. What do I need? What will help me thrive in this moment? Attending conferences, if you are a learner, attending conferences definitely is focusing on your development, especially if it's related to something that you love. Let's say you love writing, and you desire to write a book. Attend a conference about independent authors or authors who are getting publishing deals. That will light a fire in your back. Just being in that environment where you can see other people who have done it, the success that they've had, the systems that they use, like just being in those learning environments. So that's one way. And if you have one that you use when you are in an emotional rut, share that in the comments. What is that for you? What is that for you? I do know that if you're watching on Facebook, I do not see your comment, so I have to respond after the live stream. A very practical way to focus on your personal growth is to really journal. I know I mentioned this a lot, and I was not Journaling I wasn't sold on that until I was going through a state of depression, and I was encouraged to write. And this was back in 2000, maybe 14 or 15. And my coach at the time kept telling me to get a journal so you can write, get a journal. I'm like, who journals? Nobody want a journal. I finally got one, and I remember writing my first entry saying, my coach told me to get a journal, and so this is me writing in the journal. Literally, the first page says that. But as I was writing, the weight of the emotions, once I got past that not discomfort, but like resistance of writing, I started to transition to write what was on my mind, dumping that, like removing it from here, transferring it onto paper and seeing it. The release that I felt. So then what I did on the next page was I wrote out, now that I have a little bit of mental clarity, what are some of the things I can get done today? So on the right side of the page, I wrote a to-do list. And that became my practice, dump, to do. Get it out of here and then switch to my to-do or the things that I wanted to focus on. That's one way to help help to transition to an emotionally well state. And I do think that these are not practices that you do sporadically or when you are just when you're in a deep funk. Some of these things are things that we do as, I wasn't going to say mechanisms, but as we do them as a form of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like maintenance, so that we are maintaining, nourishing, fueling ourselves before we are depleted. When I travel and speak, I describe these things that I'm sharing with you. I describe them as fuel stops. And I share a story how I used to work the night shift for a transit agency in DC. And one night when I got off work at 4 a.m., I ran out of gas on a 5-lane highway. It was 4 a.m. And I called an Uber. The Uber was $12 to get to the gas station. I purchased the gas thingy, which was $8. I could only get 3 gallons of gas in that $8 can. And I had to get an Uber back to my car for another $12, put the gas in it, and that my light was still on. So I still needed gas. So at that point, I spent about $40-something. And then I went back to the gas station to fill up for $50. Now, normally gas would cost me $50. But because I waited until I ran out of gas, I had to pay that inconvenience fee of an Uber, a gas can, a little bit of gas. And all of that time delayed me from getting home. So my 12-minute work commute turned into an hour and a half fiasco. And that's kind of what happens when we don't have fuel stops. We don't have places to go when we're feeling depleted in energy, when our emotional wellness is a little low. When we don't have a fuel stop, we're all the way on E. Fuel stops help to replenish us along the way. And if you are someone whom is highly called upon, highly visible, if you're someone who is managing a lot of priorities, we can't afford to be here on E. We just can't. It's not the most optimal for our mental state of clarity. It's not the most optimal for us to function in those high visibility roles. We would be masking a lot of how we feel. Well, you don't have to do that when you have fuel stops. When you start listening to the state of your body and resting, stopping to do something that you enjoy, adding it into your schedule, creating boundaries around how your family sees you and when they pull from you, asking for help from our villages to assist you with some of your recurring responsibilities like pickup, drop off, after school activities, asking for help. Those are areas that we can go to. So when we're trading that, we're actually at a fuel stop. That fuel stop might be the gym. It might be girls' night. It might be Bible study. It might be a solo date. It might be, I don't know, a trip to Marshall's to window shop. But you need those moments. You need those moments where you are replenishing your emotional wellness. Now, again, this entire series is because the state of how you feel affects how you communicate. I can always tell how the state of someone's well-being by how they're interacting with me. Now you could say I'm judging them, and that could be true. But their tone, how quickly they're speaking, how much patience they have in answering questions that may be, that's a silly question, or it's redundant because I've already said it. How quickly they're able to problem solve or not. Their body language is a strong giveaway. Their ability to be upbeat or lack thereof. Their ability to make eye contact. These are all dead giveaway signs of a person's emotion or well-being in general, not just emotional. And the way our human brains work, and I say this all the time, people hear with their eyes. So while we are focusing on what we're saying when we're communicating, the outside people, they're looking at what we're doing. So it's not a big deal to you that you are not making eye contact because you're still being encouraging. You're still sharing your love. You're still giving praise. It's not a big deal to you that you're slouched over or looking unpresent because you're still giving love and you're still giving praise. But it's a big deal to the recipient of our communication. We won't have that full awareness of how we're showing up unless we are well. Our state is well. And that's why this topic is important. Now that I've given you a lot of things to consider, my question that I want to ask you is, what is your fuel stop? What do you go to when you are feeling close to E, which is depleted, lacking energy? Like when you get to E, 8 hours rest isn't going to do it. You need more than that. And that's the thing. When you wait until E, it requires more of you to fuel back up to get to a state of like your optimal or probably your best self. So what do you do to fuel? If you do not know, this is a great time to figure that out. Start taking note of the things that when you finish doing, you're like, man, that made me, I feel so good. It refuels you. And healthy fuel stops, do no harm to you or others. I always tell when I'm working with leaders, I list a few things that I feel are not fuel stops. Fuel stops are harmless to you, and when you are doing them, there's not a direct harm to someone else or an imbalance with someone else. So I feel, sometimes I start with the most dramatic, but drinking is not a fuel stop. We say things like, I'm going to just get a glass of wine because, it's going to relax me. And it very well might do that. Is that the only thing that can relax you? What happens when the wine isn't strong enough? Do you switch the type of cocktail? Over time, if you had a glass every time you feel stressed, would that have any harm? Well, some people may say, no, it's just a glass. But think of when you're developing a habit, if it became excessive, would there be any harm to you? You could also say, well, anything that's excessive has harm. I don't see how journaling excessively is harmful. Lighting a candle excessively, like you always have, I guess it could burn down your house. If you want to be, off the charts. Drinking, I would say, is not a fuel stop. Smoking is not a fuel stop. I've heard some people say, and this is, I am not making light of this, but cutting as a form of self-harm to reduce a sense of anxiousness, that's obviously not a fuel stop. I believe sex is not a fuel stop. If you're doing it with another person, if you're having sex with another person and it's not fuel for them, then that's not healthy for them. To me, you tell me if you disagree. I don't think that's a fuel stop. What's healthy for you? Here are some examples of a fuel stop. If you enjoy being around animals, maybe you visit an animal shelter, not to adopt them, but you go touch. It's that sensory of touching something soft, hugging it, cuddling with it, something that has no expectations from you. That's a fuel stop. Visiting a loved one to hear how they're doing. Maybe you bring them food, listen to how they're doing, especially an aging adult. That's a great fuel stop. I mentioned journaling, writing, painting, listening to music, exercising. I would even say calling someone else to encourage them. That's a great fuel stop if you're naturally an encourager and you're really good with words and you are feeling low, call someone else and lift their spirits. That's a great fuel stop. Try it out. Those are just some. What's your fuel stop? So that when you have symptoms of an emotional imbalance or you're lacking emotional wellness, that's your go-to, essentially. It takes you from feeling, I'm a little bit on E. It may not get you to full, but it'll get you further from E. That's the goal. When we start being accountable to how we are feeling, then we can be more conscious about how we're showing up in our spaces. If you are in leadership in any capacity, that's important. Well, I always say, what you model, you teach. If you're modeling the ability to manage these things, people start asking you, how do you do that? It's a great teaching opportunity. What you model, you teach. All right, I wanted to make tonight's episode a little brief. Oh my goodness, and it's not, it's 28 minutes. I'm going to wrap up there. Focus on your growth. Focus on your growth. I'm really grateful that you joined me for this series of holistic communication. And next month, we're starting a new series. We're shifting back. It's called Stage Power. I'm not going to tell you. We'll release it in the next coming weeks. But thank you for tuning in tonight. I didn't ask you this, but if you are watching live or you watch till the end, matter of fact, if you watch this till the end, type in the comments and I'm going to give you a free 1-month access to our new community that opens at the end of the month for those who are working to develop their public speaking skills. That community will open at the end of October. I'll give you free access if you watch this to the end. Just type in the comments and we'll send you over the link. Type in and add your email address, and then we'll send you access to Emerging. I love you. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. I'll see you next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Bye.